All right. Welcome back to episode 5.
Oh,
Episode 5
I think we're on 6.
of investigating the BMF here in St. Louis. I think we got a special show today that has everything in it, doesn't it, Joe?
It does. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of Archie's conversations.
And with us is former detective, retired detective Archie Shaw from the St. Louis Police Department. Welcome to the show, Arch.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we'll get into Archie. Archie was really involved with the prosecution of the Sills, a lot of the members of the Sills family, and we're going to get into their affiliation with the Desoto Street Hustlers, and so it'll be fun. It'll be a fun show. But before that, we always like to thank our sponsor, Kessler Williams Law Firm. They can be found at kesslerwilliams.com. Our friend John Davis. And John is familiar with the courtroom. He used to be a state judge. And then he went to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he is now in private practice with the Kessler Williams Law Firm. And for any of your defense needs, violent crime, drug crimes, white-collar crimes, all the way down to DWIs and some of the minor offenses, get a hold of John Davis at friend JD at kesslerwilliams.com. And before we get started, Joe, you have a little shout out to somebody that you might be somebody important in your life.
I do. I think it's really important to exercise some debt of gratitude to some people that really put their lives on the line. And I'm not talking about police officers. I'm talking about those who teach our children, those who make this country great for sure. So my wife's going to finish up her 35th year this
35?
year. 35 years.
Man.
First 5 in Chicago's South Side at DS Wentworth at 69th and Sangamon. Nice school. She was in the ghetto before I was, which was kind of nice. But I'll tell you what, my wife has dedicated her life to teaching the youth of America, and she gets messages and shout outs from kids all the way back to DS Wentworth. So I got to say something about teachers. Without them, we don't exist as a country.
Yep,
we don't
very
exist
important.
as a community, and they are the best. So to Lori, cheers to you. Cheers to all your chums, and looking forward to having a cold beer with you a little bit later.
That's awesome. What do you think of that, Arch?
Oh, that's great. That is really great. It takes a lot of dedication these days to teach these
It ain't easy
nowadays.
It ain't easy.
It isn't. I think also I have to throw a little shout out here. So everybody knows that I kind of left in 2010. So these guys have been here forever. In the 5th, I believe, you guys were together. But when I first moved here, Archie was a larger than life character in a good way, not a character in a bad way, a character in a good way. He knew the streets. He knew everybody. He was embedded in the FBI. And if you needed help on anything, Archie was the guy to go to, especially with intelligence in the city. He had a unique ability to interact with everybody with grace and purpose. And I think
Respect.
Without a doubt. And he knew that if somebody was in a lot of trouble, he'd give them the chance to try to get out of the trouble, or at least find his way into something good. So to you, Archie, I remember you when we were younger, and we always looked up to you. And we always thought you were a larger than life person. And it's great to be here with you today and talk about something that's really important to me. And it's kind of understand this Black Mafia family. And today we're going to talk about the Sills, which I don't know much about, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. You and Tommy.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Well, I think where Archie's expertise comes in this case is that, again, it was the 5th district, which is on the city's north side. Near the, I guess you could call it the water tower, won't you?
Yeah,
right there by the water tower on East Grand and all the surrounding areas. But give us a little bit, Arch. Just tell us about how the Sills are connected with the Black Mafia family.
They connected through Robert Sills, and Robert Sills, they call him Fat Cat. He was one of the persons that was getting multi-kilos of drugs from the Black Mafia family back then. And he was located in the 5th district around that water tower area. They stayed on 25th Street at one point, but they ran John, all those streets up there around that 5th district and around that water tower. You probably didn't sell no drugs if it didn't come from Robert up in that area back then.
Hey,
Cocaine, that would be, right?
Yeah.
Arch, do you know how Robert met the BMF members or how he was introduced?
So I couldn't tell you how he was introduced with the BMF. I just know he had a connection with them, and he was receiving multi kilos from the BMF.
And that would from Dogman would be the specific. What at the end, at least when we were investigating, he was getting somewhere from 50 to 100 keys through Dogman.
Through Dogman, Dogman was, Dogman was delivering kilos to several people,
Right.
because he was the one who was counting them up, loading them up. He knew where the safe house was at. He knew who he was meeting, and whoever he was instructed to go meet, he count up their dope, take it to him.
And then Dogman, that's the book here with the Black Mafia family, and hopefully we'll get him on the show one time, won't we, Arch?
We're gonna try.
And Dogman's real name is Danny Jones, and he'll come in at the end of this story with tied into the Sills brothers. But how about Kenneth Sills was his brother? Explain a little bit about Kenneth.
Yeah, Kenneth Sills was his brother, and Kenneth Sills went to jail for murder, of Burgess, where he ended up gunning them down. I think that was right there at Page and Vanderventor.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was a witness who was a security guard who happened to see him, and he was actually the only person who can ID him for that murder.
But before that, there was a search warrant conducted, and Archie and I yesterday, we got on a three-way call with Billy Noonan, another legendary detective in the area. And it was about a 25-minute phone call, but that was some interesting stuff on it, Arch.
Yes, it was.
Because and Billy tied in, and because Kenneth had shot this Marshall Burgess. What was the reasoning behind the shooting that Kenneth would want to kill Marshall Burgess?
That was received. The reason he killed him because Marshall Burgess had got locked up after a search warrant, and he got locked up. Immediately after he got out, there was a search warrant conducted up in the 5th District by Billy Noonan, where they seized multi guns from the DeSoto Street Hustlers guys.
And I think that was it. I think Billy said it was 49 guns.
49 guns.
Yeah, that was a good one. And so they had identified, and then by the way, that I asked Billy, was Marshall the informant? Because he was dead, and Billy, if he would have told me, he's like, oh no, it was so and so, but I couldn't verify if he was living or not, so we're going to leave his name out of it.
Well, you know how that is. A person get locked up on a search warrant, he get out. The first thing, your gang members, your gang buddies, your guys you deal dope with, whatever, they figured you snitched. Okay, whether somebody else gave the information and hit that house. First person they were going to think was going to be Burgess.
Yep.
And that's part of that gang.
So we'll bounce around a little bit about, a lot of the members involved in this, but you started that murder story. And then while you were investigating that, while you were investigating Robert Sills, you got information on what was going on with Kenneth Sills, Kiki, who was accused or has been convicted of shooting Marshall Burgess. He's in jail at the time.
That's correct.
And he had already been through 2 trials that were hung juries, correct?
That's correct.
And then you're now investigating Robert Sills and a couple other members, but you get information and then take it from there.
Basically, I got the information that they was going to bring Robert Sills and other family members was going to bring in a guy. Kenneth was up to go to trial again. So they wanted to kill the security guard. If they figured if they killed him, they wouldn't have no one to testify. But that information came to me. I immediately, basically informed say, do not sleep on this. I'm dead serious about that. I went down to the prosecutor's office, explained it to them, the information that I received. We then brought the security officer in and his dad in and informed them that it was a credible threat on their life. Well, that particular night, it was just probably the next night, the day after, a guy came into St. Louis, I believe from Detroit. And he was dropped off at the security officer's dad's house. And he went up to knock on the door. pretended that he wanted to get a drink of water first. And then the dad wouldn't refuse to open up the door. He said, well, can you give me a jump? And the dad now knows something suspicious.
And they now know that they were already informed that something might happen.
Due to the fact that I already gave him that information, he is kind of on his game at this point. And the young man that's knocking at the door pulled a gun, shoots off into the house, misses the dad, but the dad returned fire, pops him in the chest.
Oh, wow.
And the getaway car was waiting on him, thinking he's dead, drives off and leaves him.
Now, Arch, do you think that hit was helped out by the BMF out of Detroit, or just Detroit?
I think that was just through the Sills family. The BMF didn't have nothing to do with that.
Okay.
And then that's just one of the one of the horrible things that happened during this. But you also had going back to the Desoto Street Hustlers. The Sills family was very tight with a guy by the name of Donnie White, who went by Cash, and he would probably be one of the top members of the Desoto Street Hustlers. Would you characterize him as that?
I would say he'd be one of the top guys. He was one of the top guys at one point when they was dealing a lot of dope and doing a lot of gang banging back then.
And then you had you did a search warrant up there, and you arrested a guy by the name of Maurice Woods. Tell us that story.
Well, I did do a search warrant on Maurice Woods' house, and this was going to be on a Friday night. We kick him in, we get him, and everything. It was late in the evening. I sat down and I talked to Maurice, but I knew Maurice already, because back in the day I worked at a nightclub. I had a relationship with Maurice, and Maurice was just a good guy. That day, I told Maurice I wasn't going to lock him up at that point. I was going to come back and interview him and talk to him. Well, Maurice said, "Hey, Shaw, can I holler at you?" And he repeatedly said that. I never forget it. He said, "Can I holler at you?" And I said, "Maurice, not today, not today. I will set up something for you and we'll talk." That night, it was only his kids, his old lady, and him in the house. Okay? It was only him and his kids. Very next day, Maurice get called out the house. He go to a nightclub. I want to say it was up on Grand and Montgomery. I believe he come back home. As soon as he get back home, he's laying in the bed. His wife is right here. His two kids is in the front part of the house. They kick in the door that wasn't really fortified because it was a search warrant was just done there. This is the next day. And they kill Maurice, leave his wife alive, leave his kids alive, walk back out the door.
And then his wife or her girlfriend that was the sister of Cash?
That cousin.
A cousin of Cash?
Yeah. And what I say is this. Maurice never knew he was sleeping with the enemy.
Oh, wow.
And I'm telling you that because at that point, nobody was in that house to give out that information. Where do you think it came from?
Right. Well, like connect the dots, right, Joe? Sometimes you how to connect the dots. And it just shows, and Joe, you had mentioned it, the fallout effect of the BMF, and go through that just a little bit.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's a dangerous game, right? These things are great while you're in them, and when they fall apart very, very fast. But one of the things that I think is important, and I've talked about it with other producers and some other people about the BMF, and at first the BMF was almost like a Robin Hood type organization where they talked about how it was an increase in businesses that in the ghetto, cash businesses, but businesses nonetheless, and how it brought prosperity to the community. And in one respect, I think that's correct. But in another respect, I think it's almost like a Greek tragedy, right? We've said that a couple times on this show.
Right. And
by creating prosperity, they destroy the community from the inside as well. So by building it up and then selling the poison to the constituents of the community, they destroy it all in one. So eventually it falls. There's no way it's not going to fall. There is absolutely no way.
Right. Well, I mean, you're just listening to two murder stories.
Right.
We're going to get into a kidnapping here.
And once the violence starts, it's really now law enforcement's coming in heavy, and you're starting to bring a lot of attention to yourself. So it's an interesting story. It's one that's never been fixed. You can look throughout any type of organized crime throughout history, and if it's perpetrated in the communities with which you live, you destroy that community.
Right. And one of the things that, and you said it's kind of like a Robin Hood thing. We did a thing on the Petties, notorious, very violent family. But one of the comments is that they used to take all the kids in the neighborhood. They would load them up on a bus, pay for the bus, and run them out to Six Flags. That's a very benevolent thing to do. For inner city kids, and the Petties would pay for the whole thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's like you said. But then on the other end of it, there was a lot of stories that weren't so charming. But one of the things, Archie, too, is that we'll get into those DeSoto Street Hustlers. Those guys they not only dealt cocaine, but they dealt a lot of heroin too, didn't they?
They did, and depending on what part of DeSoto you was on, you can get whatever you want. You can get weed, whatever. You can 1400 block. That's a whole different story.
They weren't getting their heroin from the BMF, though, were they?
No.
Do we know who they were getting their heroin from?
No, I don't.
Does the name Ray Hayward? Billy Noonan said maybe Hayward.
Well, Hayward been around a long time. Hayward, he was off to his own thing. I mean, he wasn't tied in with them. He was doing his own thing, and he was a survivor for a long time.
How about the House of Hackneys?
The trouble of Hackney. That's a family that whatever it was, they was involved in.
I thought, and the matriarch. I don't know. Did you remember Lulu?
No, I don't.
She was the matriarch, and when I got there in like '93, I think I was in the 5th district, and the House of Hackneys was just a notorious. I mean, this place was the mecca of hood shenanigans. I mean, they were wasn't it? I mean, there were shootings and police chases and search warrants, and the house was just and Lulu. She was an older lady when I was there, so I'm sure she's passed away. R.I.P. Lulu, but she had to deal with all of it. I mean, it was a loud house too because they had a lot of females involved.
That is right. That is right.
When you pulled up,
the house.
and when you pulled up, it got loud quick. It didn't matter what you pulled up for.
Right, and they will fight.
Oh, they run. There's everybody. I mean, there was just a wild block.
Mm-hmm.
And they had, and I don't even know, were they tied like right into the DeSoto Street Hustlers, or were they just like affiliated, or they're just in the neighborhood?
Just in the neighborhood.
Okay.
There was a family that was known in that neighborhood, and they was a trouble family now, but they wasn't tied in with the.
You can't mention the word DeSoto and not mention the Hackney, the family, the House of Hackneys.
Now, Arch, one of the things we talked about a little bit earlier on in the show is the transition from a heroin-based distribution center in St. Louis to more of a cocaine-based with some of the younger guys. When you were talking about the DeSoto Street Hustlers and the heroin side, were those guys the older players, or were they the young guys too, or it didn't matter?
No, it really didn't matter. It was mostly the older guy, because the older guys who was really dealing with heroin, the younger guys strictly was basically dealing with cocaine.
Okay. Which I think is, we got to bring in fascinating, which I like the history behind all of this stuff and how the young kids kind of transformed it, and BMF transformed it to a cocaine based type distribution, even though they did heroin. Like Q had a source up in Chicago, so he would just drive up there and suicide run, a few kilos back and forth. But when I first got here in '96, the Bays were kind of running the show on the heroin side, and those were some neat New York connections or some LA connections and some old school stuff. So kind of a neat little thing, and that's why I asked that question about the Hustlers.
Now, how does the lanky Larry Hamilton, how does he fit into the Sills? Is he a nephew?
He's a cousin of Robert Sills, Lanky Larry, Nay Ward. That's his. I want to say
grandmother,
I believe.
Yeah, because she gets kidnapped along the way.
Yeah, she get kidnapped about Lanky. Actually, I think Lanky owed a debt, and they end up kidnapping Nay.
And that was with Glenn Teague.
Wow.
That's what the word we're getting is that he owed Glenn Teague some money, and As you guys have heard, Glenn Teagues is tied in with Snipes, and he was tied in with Oscar Dillon, or I'm sorry, with Q back in the day. And I think what happens is when Q gets arrested, then Danny Jones takes over, a lot of the distribution in St. Louis because he had become tight with Meach over the years. And I think there's even J-Bo probably just got to the back of, because Meach had met this Danny Jones, and Danny says he's doing 1,000 kilos a month.
1,000 kilos a month.
He said once the limousine stretch cars got involved, that's when they got up to about 1,000 keys a month they were doing.
Now that's just in St. Louis.
That's just in St. Louis.
It's only in St. Louis, yeah.
And I was asking, I had Archie ask him, hey, does he know this guy? Does he know this guy? And all he said was, I got to see their face, because he didn't even know them all by name.
No.
And he was the only guy. So and we hope to get him on, but when you send them trap cars like that, Danny was the only guy that knew how to get in and out of them, correct?
That's correct.
So whether he's putting money in it or whether he was taking dope out of it, he was the only one. And you had to go through sophisticated steps, maybe 8, 9 steps. And you had to do it within 30 seconds. And then it would pop the trap open.
Right.
And they would get the dope. And then Danny would work his magic and getting it all around. But at the time, he had mentioned that he had dealt 50 to 100 to repeating myself, but 50 to 100 of the Sills family.
Do we know where those traps were built? Were they built here or were they built somewhere else?
I didn't.
The traps was built somewhere else. Even the driver didn't know how to get in the trap. So it couldn't have been a situation where a driver pulled over and was going to steal money or dope out of it because he didn't even know about the trap. When the car got here, Danny was already instructed on what to do and where to put it at. And so he was the person that dealt with getting it in, packaging, and moving it out.
Now they were doing, if I remember correctly, they were doing the runs. They would bring the dope in, turn around and flip the money right back in and send it back out. So they were doing, they don't call them suicide runs, but usually organizations don't do that. These traps were so good that very rarely did they get caught. Now, I do have another question about Danny, the dog man, by the way. So he originally meets Terry Flannery through Wani.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Wani next
week.
So
we got to get him on because I have 1,000 questions
we want to get him on, right?
About the BMF. And he originally meets Terry, but like everything else, somehow, Terry starts cutting the dope. And when Terry starts cutting the dope, a bunch of these guys kind of go back to Meach. So at one point, the Dogman does go back to Meach. Terry gets arrested at the house up in North County.
All of them get arrested.
Yeah, remember that the marshals.
And then we'll get into that here in a little bit because something happens to Dogman here at the end that isn't.
And it's all in the book, which is really good. It's a good read.
It is.
It's an easy read and it's a good read. It's an airport read.
But we'll get back to with Lanky Larry Hamilton. So Nene is his, and then her last name is Ward, correct? The Nene Ward. That's his grandmother.
Renee Ward.
Renee Ward. So. And then he owes Teague some money, or Teague accused him of owing him a ton of money. And they set up a kidnapping of him. And, a maniac was involved, a guy by the name of Ricky Clemens. Was it Ricky Clemens? Maniac, he's involved. And this is just, word we're getting on the street, and it's pretty reliable, though.
Alleged, right?
Alleged, but extremely reliable. So they kidnapped Nene. And then do you remember how they got out? Who got it was the guy that you did the search warrant on, or the wire on, Pops.
Well, they made a phone call. They never did. They made a phone call. They never did get the money because a call was made. Hey, let her go. I know this family. Let her go. And people got mad because they didn't get paid. But at the end of the day, she was released.
Yep. And then later to be arrested by you.
Yep.
So get into that a little bit. Let's get into the investigation. So while this is going on, at one point in time, Arch gets in an investigation with the FBI on Robert Sills. And it had a nice culmination that you talk about all the time. It involves Nene, who just got mentioned being kidnapped. But it's a whole family of crime. So go ahead with that, Arch.
Well, I conducted an investigation on Robert Sills and his organization. It was Robert Sills, Robert McGee, which is Goldie, You had his little brother that was involved, and you had the guy just was here that went to trial, D-Boy, Derek Terry.
Terry, yeah.
Derek Terry was one of his main little runners, and Derek Terry moved a lot of dope for Robert, a whole lot of dope. His little brother moved a lot of dope. I'm getting the information that Robert is moving on a lot of dope. He's moving it back from Texas, back here to St. Louis, and he was using his aunt and her downstairs neighbor. And they what they do is they'll take that train up to Texas or wherever they was going, and they put 2 baby dolls in a little carrying thing like they had a baby in it. So they'd go out, and when they come back, them babies turn into kilos. and
Of course they did.
Yeah. And so I went out to Pearland, Texas. Robert was staying at. I seen his house. Seen him moving out there. He had a beautiful house out there. I come back because I know they coming back to St. Louis. And first time I missed them, they went up to, they passed St. Louis. I'm thinking they're gonna be in St. Louis, and they went up on the other side of Illinois and got off there. But the next time I was waiting on them, and they come through the bus station, the train station there, her and the neighbor. We approached them. They got 2 bags, and we end up getting 7 kilos off her.
Hey, that's a cool grandma.
Oh yeah,
That is.
And I'll tell you
Just
this,
kidding.
Nay, that she's a great lady. She did what she did, but at the end of the day, after talking to her, she was a wonderful person to talk to, real down to earth. And you got to realize, here go Robert, who put his auntie up to do this. And when she got caught, he wouldn't even give her money for an attorney.
That's bullshit.
He wouldn't even answer her phone call.
That's some bullshit.
So at that point, you got a lady that's stuck with the bag,
Yeah.
getting ready to go to jail, and sat down and talked to her, and she explained the whole situation.
We're saying they're getting their dope from the BMF, but these guys are always hustling. You're getting dope from anywhere they can get it.
Anywhere they can get it. You a dope man can't be out. You know,
Right.
If somebody is dry, they're gonna go somewhere else.
And I'm pretty sure that when you got him, Robert Sills, he escapes the first wave of the indictments for BMF, correct?
Yeah, he do.
So there's a little dry up period. Well, he's got to keep going, and then you get him after he escaped the BMF,
right?
Because those indictments had come down, and as a matter of fact, Robert is in a house. You were at that. Tell us about how the information you got at that house.
So first of all, I told you about this book.
Uh-huh.
So the most inaccurate part of the book, sorry, dog man, is the part about North County.
Okay.
So I can't give the whole story up, but we can tell bits and pieces of it. And the amount of money that he said was there, that's not even true. That's not even close. But what's interesting is we always talk about how these guys have to be right every single solitary time. And one of the things that preys upon them and is the source, right? So if you have 100 different sources, there's 99 different ways you're going to get caught because you don't know who they are, right? So I think one of the big downfalls of the BMF was that strategy, that push, when they moved away from the Colombians, when they moved away from some of the serious Mexicans, the main sources where they would send all the dope to the White House and then ship it out, you can control it a lot more. When you start to go to all these different sources, you open yourself up to liabilities. And I think that's one of the things that happened. But what these guys do is they go up. Terry's got a warrant for his arrest by the U.S. Marshals. And they go up to a house.
Terry is Terry Flannery.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
Tall T, or not Tall T.
Southwest T.
Southwest T. So he goes up to this house, and these young guys, and 2 of our favorite guys, characters in a good way, Eric Ernst
Moldy.
and Sammy Jefferson.
Oh, yeah.
So they're there.
Okay.
And what happens is they decide to go to a place that's close to somebody that's associated with law enforcement. And all that happens is it's out of the ordinary, right? That area up in North County, I think it's Spanish Lake. It's just beautiful. There's these old acre homes, and we're going to talk a little bit about geology because we always got to throw that in, but we got the confluence of the Missouri and the Mississippi River, right? It is the most spectacular area in the world. And a bunch of, I guess we used to call them Thundercats back in the day, no disrespect. They're sitting there in a motorhome. They're playing cards. There's money everywhere. Well, somebody calls the police. So then we do a little bit of surveillance. We figure out who some of the players are. We realize that there's an active warrant. We get a search warrant, which almost puts us in jeopardy through a little misnomer. But we go up there and we execute this. There's about 600,000 or 700,000 in cash, another maybe million in jewelry, and a motorhome loaded with Gucci clothes and all kinds of other stuff. So Danny, little inaccurate on those numbers, but that's about where we were. And there's another DEA guy. We talked about that, where another DEA guy from across the river is trying to bogart the arrest and smashes his car. And, sometimes law enforcement doesn't cooperate either. And that was one night, but that was a great night because for us in our group, it blew up the intel. And that's when we really started to realize that the BMF, and that was about what, 2009 or 10, I don't remember, maybe a little earlier than that. But what that did for us is that put us on the hunt,
right?
And for BMF, and said, oh my gosh, these guys are really in depth. And we were 10 years too late,
right? And then Arch, piggybacking off of that seizure of that money and all these guys getting caught in that house, Danny Jones has some involvement in that. And Dogman, tell us about what his involvement in that and then what happened to him as a result of that.
Danny, on that particular day, Danny wasn't directly in the house. Danny had just made a delivery. He come back to the house and he claimed that he seen a white guy come out the house. So he figured that they was the police. So he basically was trying to get away, but he ran into one of the officers' cars and ended up getting arrested.
What's his name?
It was the guy trying to steal the arrest.
The guy from Illinois?
Yeah, the guy from Illinois.
Yeah, he ended up getting arrested. They all in the cell together at the end of the day. Now, he claimed that he overheard Fat Cat make a call to go rob the safe house, which that wasn't the house that everybody got arrested in. It was another house in Florissant nobody knew about.
That had all the dope at it?
That had all the dope in it.
Okay.
And so therefore, he knew he had served Robert, and he knew that Robert knew that. Robert put out a statement that Danny stole the dope.
All right.
Danny have a conversation with Meech and them, explaining his side, explaining what he did, and they told him, we know you didn't do it. And from there on, Fat Cat had it out for Danny and wanted to get rid of him.
And then he said, how did he, and then they go about and they give it a good shot. So tell us about the attempt and how that went down.
According to Danny, that earlier that day when he got shot, he was in Clayton at a sushi bar eating. He happened to see Robert in there. So Danny was driving a little fancy white Maserati at that time. He leaves. He comes back to the city. He claimed that he was followed and ended up going down by the Cochrans at a little apartment that he had down there. He parked his car, and he claimed at that point he was approached by now he say Derek Terry,
D-boy,
who
he's back,
chased him around, shooting at him, and ended up shooting him 16 times.
That's amazing.
And Danny, he was in bad shape. He was at the hospital, and he was in so bad of a shape that his jaw was broken. He was eating out of a straw. He could not identify D-boy at that time. And you got to realize Danny was out for a long time. I thought he was going to die. When I went to the hospital to see him, he was in bad shape. I'll tell you how bad it was. The prosecutor in Detroit, her last Don, her first name was Don, I believe. I ended up somehow getting in contact with her. We was talking back and forth, and she asked me, was Danny gonna live? And I told her at that point, I don't think so. I really don't think so. He in bad shape, because she had Danny at a leadership role, and when she believed that Danny wasn't going to make it, I think he was taken off that.
Okay. Because what's interesting about Dogman is we knew who he was here in St. Louis, but we didn't know how big he was.
Right.
We really didn't. We thought he was just the dog guy, the car guy. We knew he was the trap guy, but we were not in tune to him moving that much product until that day.
Right.
And then after the attempted murder, we knew that he controlled the keys to the castle on some of the good intel. So they were trying to kill him. But an interesting thing. So a little ancillary comment, which I think is really important. You know, his insurance company never paid for the damage to that car. So
to the police car.
right. So Dogman, and then I had that car after that, and it never worked right. So it was a little red Nissan Altima, and it was all smashed up. So he got away with that. He didn't have to pay that.
So Dogman was in the Detroit indictments.
Yeah,
He was.
Or was it Detroit or Atlanta?
No, he was in the Detroit indictments for Terry.
Okay.
Yeah, he was definitely in the Detroit indictment. I talked to the prosecutor myself.
There were two sets of indictments that came out right away, or right at that point, and it was Motor City Mafia, which kind of precipitated those indictments, and they were based off wiretap conversations that they had with Terry and I believe one of his girlfriends, and that's kind of how they started to unravel some of the leadership stuff. And indictments came out for Meach and his crew, and Terry and his crew, and then there were some crossovers. So some people got indicted twice.
In Arch, you also did another person we'll probably do another show on, and his faction was Pops. Tell us a little bit about Pops.
Well, I actually didn't have the case on Pops. That was actually the FBI case.
The FBI, but you were involved in it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll talk a little bit.
Now we're
about
talking about Pops, who drives the smart car. Is that who we're talking about?
Pops.
Pops drove the smart car. The 6'4" gentleman.
I don't know.
Kenny Turner.
Kenny Turner.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Pops.
Okay.
Pops used to drive a smart car.
Okay. I don't know.
And he was Quentin's guy.
Yeah.
Now there's some.
He's also the guy that gets Nene out.
Yeah.
He's the one that makes the call to gets Nene released from that original kidnapping.
Okay. Yeah, a character in and of itself.
Is he?
Looking forward to hearing what Archie has to say here.
But we'll get into that, and we're going to get into the Wani one next week, right, Joe? The Wani wire. We're going to have hopefully get on Chris Ebner, who's a retired DEA agent that had a lot to do with that. Wani is the Duran Gatling, who is the brother of Dion, and also and he's the one that introduced Dogman to Meach.
No, actually Terry, I believe,
was
was the
it Terry
first.
was the first one?
According to the book, it's to Terry at the first, because Terry was trying to build an establishment here, and they actually like the dogs. What were they? American
Bulldogs,
Pit Terriers, or something?
Yeah. And he's still doing dogs, right?
Is he really?
He's doing dogs.
He's doing something with slingshots too, isn't he?
Slingshots, but he do a lot with dogs. He makes a lot of money off selling them dogs.
He's doing good now.
Yeah, he's doing good. He up. He's moving better than me.
After being shot 16 times.
Yeah.
You said sometimes when you talk to him, he just gets real excited when he talks, just because he's so happy to be around.
You know, I got shot one time. I got shot in the back once, and I'm happy to be here. 16 times. Me, I'm dead. You know, Danny, he up. And Danny ain't a big guy.
No,
Danny. He's not a big guy at all. But he up and he moving and he happy.
Let me ask you this, Arch, and this just came to me. Remember Sweet Peas ice cream place up there by the water tower?
Yeah.
Were they involved with the Sills?
They wasn't involved with the Sills. Matter of fact, they allegedly two of Sweet Pea's nephews, I believe it was.
And Sweet Pea was Lemuel Houston, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
They tried to kill Kenneth Sills, but they missed. And with dealing with Kenneth Sills, you don't want to miss.
Kiki was his name. Kenneth, right?
That's Kenneth Sills.
Yeah.
And right now, today, those two guys ain't here.
Oh, wow.
But
Connect your own dots.
connect your own dots with that. And one thing I can say about Kenneth is this, and I got a story I want to run through it right quick.
Okay.
If Kiki said he's going to kill you, you better go and hide, because he mean it. I was working the front door at Spruce, and I worked it for years, and Kiki used to come in there, and Kiki brought a bunch of guys with him, and he always paid for everybody. I seen one day when he pulled out a rubber band and the bank rubber band, and it had all hundreds, and he paid. But while he was in Spruce, he was respected. He minded his own business. And this cop out of Wellston went up to Kiki and basically tried to chomp him. And Kiki wasn't going for that. You know, he didn't back down. And the cop ended up removing his gun from his waist, from his holster, and that kind of pissed Kiki off. And Kiki told him, "Man, I'm gonna get you."
Oh, boy.
And he said that. Well, the very next week when Kiki came in there, I told Kiki, I said, let me talk to you. And I took him in the kitchen, and I took the officer in the kitchen. I said, Kiki, man, I don't want no problems out you. I don't want you to have no problems in this club. And he said, Shaw, I ain't started nothing. He said, but man, he started with me and he pulled a gun on me. And I said, I'm gonna talk to him. I said, all I want y'all to do is shake hands and make up. Well, when Kiki shook his hand, Kiki did like this.
Oh, turned his head.
And turned his head. And then I said, all right, Kiki, I appreciate that. And he walked on out the kitchen. I told the officer, I say, don't let him catch you at Snooks. Boy, he said, well, what Snooks got to do with it? I said, I don't give a damn if it's Snooks, Walmart, Kmart, Burger King. The man gonna get you still. I said, he shook your hand just because of me, but he didn't look at you. And you better believe it, that ain't over.
Wow.
Stay away from that man.
How's it? Do we know where the policeman's at now?
He's still alive right
Okay.
now. That's because Kiki in jail. But
Kiki decided to kill Burgess first.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
You know, Arch, I think that I tried to, there was a couple of you city cops. I was never a police officer before I came down here. I went right to the agent side and I never got that exposure. You know, I grew up on the South Side, so a nice neighborhood, you know, nothing crazy. But when you treat people with respect, even if you're on different sides, and this is not a love fest for criminals and I don't want them to love us, none of that. I'm just saying, if you treat people with respect like you have through your whole career, you know what you end up doing? Saving a few lives. And that's what matters.
Well, and that's where I've been all my career. My career has been like this. Yes, I'm a police officer. Yes, I'm gonna do a job, and I believe I was good at what I was doing. But my thing is, they so dope. They did whatever. I don't hate these guys.
No,
You know, why would I do that? Why would I? I spent more time trying to help somebody out. Now everybody ain't gonna get it.
no.
Everybody's, oh man, I wouldn't trust Shaw. I wouldn't do this. Man, I done had a guy turn himself in after he killed somebody, gave me the gun. Okay? He didn't have to do that. I walked him down there. I walked him out to St. Louis County because of the fact that at the end of the day, you still got somebody out there going to try to kill you and your family. You got the police looking for you. I'm giving you the best way.
Right.
I'm going to walk you in there. I'm going to make sure you don't get killed. And that's the way it worked. I'm going to make sure you don't get killed. But you got to respect those guys.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, they'll respect you.
You know, and I hate to keep bringing the name up, but Nate Williams is a guy that was he was not to be trifled with back in the day. He was a tremendous distributor of cocaine. But you know, myself and Bottini locked him up, and he listens to the show now and he comments a lot. And one of the best compliments we got is he says, "Hey, you guys were doing a job. We were doing what we did. He goes, you treated us with respect. I treated you with respect. He's doing well now. He also reached out and wants to get Sal Sierra on the show to talk about the Noble Bennetts.
Yeah.
And
I think that'd be great.
and so I did hit him back that says, you know, it might not be Sal's kind of cup of tea to come on a podcast. And he said, tell him Nate said he could come on again. And I said, it probably hold more weight than me asking him.
Yeah.
But no, that's just what.
And that's how Nate is. You know, Nate respected out here. That you don't see nobody going up and trying to hurt him. That's because Nate is a Grim Reaper himself. You know,
Like I said, not to be trifled with.
He's not to be played with. You go back to, you know, you got this little beef going on now with all these guys talking about coffee, talking about meat or whatever case. You got to realize back in the day, everybody said don't snitch. That's all you ever heard them guys say, don't snitch.
Mm-hmm.
Now what you hearing? They snitch.
Mm-hmm.
Cuffy is old school.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Cuffy is old school. Wani was his little brother. After Wani died and Turtle got killed here, you ain't heard nothing else about the BMF here.
Right.
You ain't heard not one thing about the BMF here.
Yep.
Why? Because there was a statement put out there. They broke up, and you ain't heard a word from them. No, everybody was wearing BMF shirts. When the last time you seen somebody wearing?
You don't see that in the club no more here.
You don't see that because they was doing it then, but they don't do that now because that statement was put out there. I want to say this before we get out of here.
Okay.
Robert Sills had a nephew named Bobby Ward. Okay. They called him Vegas Sills. Okay. Vegas Sills respected me, but he wanted to be Robert out here. He glorified Robert. I raised him up playing basketball, coaching him in basketball. He always called me coach, no matter where I see him. But he couldn't stay out of trouble. Yeah. Okay, he couldn't stay out of trouble. He did his music thing. He died trying to be Robert, trying to be the dope man when he had talent in other things. Yeah. Okay, he had real talent in other things. I really liked it, Bob. Anytime he needed me, I always was there because I knew the pressure that he had on him. You know, Robert didn't put money in his hands. Bobby out here moving a little dope, so he didn't got way more money than going to work a job. So, he buying these cars. But what I say to all of these young guys, whether you rapping, you beef rapping, you talking about killing somebody, or you carrying a gun, it always gonna come to an end. And it may not be by the police. It be that other person that think you got something. The other person think you got a gun. You rapping about somebody and talking about what you did, and you killed one of their homies. You killed somebody's mama. You killed somebody's mama. You can't walk these streets. No. If it don't happen today, it's gonna happen tomorrow.
Yeah, Archie, that's powerful to end it with. That's
right. Well, that'll wrap it up. We've gone a little long. We appreciate you, Arch.
Oh, no problem.
Great to see you again,
Same
Archie.
here. Same here. Good seeing you.
All right. Until next week, we'll be back with the Wani Wire next week. Until then, peace.